So going on to that, obviously Malaysian cuisine is very, very mixed because Malaysia is a melting pot of lots of different cultures.
Yes, I like this question already. Go ahead.
Um, so from my understanding, there's the biggest mix of cultures there is there's Chinese influence, there's Indian influence, there is some kind of Indonesian influence as well. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Right. So just a tiny correction. Not exact. Well, yeah, okay. It's just when you said Indonesian, I was like, oh, I'm gonna get attacked if I don't say something about that. Yeah, so we do have three main races in Malaysia. We have the Malays, and we have Chinese, and we have Indians. So it's like three main races. There are obviously more, but but by far, like the majority are Malays, and you have Chinese and Indians. And so that's what we grew up with in Malaysia, and I think it's really awesome. It's um it's one of, I think, Malaysia's strengths. And part of its beauty is the mix of cultures that we have, and it bleeds into everything that we do, right? And I am definitely not the I unfortunately am not the I'm not representative of like the perfect Malaysian citizen. Um, but I'm still proud of it. And sorry, were you asking about like food specifically, or
No, a little bit about everything. About
yeah,
how, I mean, food definitely, but also about how everything functions, how you see the different representation of all these cultures in one place.
right, okay, great. Yeah, it's a lot to talk about there. Um, Not sure where to start, but I think it's funny because I always tell this to people who I meet outside of Malaysia is that you never really have to explain this or talk about this when you're in the country. And the first time that I had to, and that was the first time that I went, oh wow, that's kind of funny, was when I left the country and I was explaining to someone, it's like, oh, I'm from Malaysia, and then they asked me, oh, they either asked me what language we speak over there, or if people, or if, if I look like, or if most Malaysians look the way I do. And that was the first time I went, oh wow, and I was actually at a loss for words because I had no idea how to explain it, because that wasn't something that I ever had experience explaining back at home, or so I just didn't have the language. Like it just, it made me hesitate, and I had to really think about how to explain this to people who don't understand it. And it's not like it's not crazy, right? It's not novel or it's not unique. Like there are so many places in the world where they have a similar cultural makeup, or even more diverse. As I've learned um, going out of the country and all that. Um, but I think it's beautiful, and it appears the diversity appears through our languages, our food, and I'd like to say general acceptance. Of course, if we really want to talk about it, there's a whole discussion about how that's changing, how the lines between cultures and races are either solidifying or not. Unfortunately, I mean, usually when we talk about things, it's because they're bad, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Do you, sorry, do you feel like there's, yeah, on that regard, do you feel like there is some degree of separation, segregation, not segregation in terms of is put in by the government, but in terms of the people themselves self-segregate. They kind of stick to their heritage. Is it very mixed, or do you feel like, you still go and there's strong communities within those backgrounds, those heritages?
yeah, for sure. And this is something where I realize that my viewpoint is pretty different from others because I grew up imagining that we're all holding hands and we don't care what race another person is or anything. But then I talked to some other adults and they're like, no, it's pretty segregated if you look at workplaces, for example, or certain parts of the country. um Unfortunately, it is like there is a line that people draw between themselves. um so for example, I think the workplace is a great example. I've heard stories where people would really only hang with people of their same race, or they would eat with people who look like them, for example. But I don't think that that is the case everywhere, not yet, and hopefully never. I also do think it's a thing about time as well, because like I always remember my dad telling me about how where he grew up, there were he's obviously Chinese Malaysian is what I'd say. But he grew up with a lot of other Malay neighbors as well. So you have Chinese neighbors and Malay neighbors, um, and growing up, there are things that happen, um, racial tensions sometimes growing up. But as far as he and his friends were concerned, like, or his neighbors, like, it's just like they were together. They were united. They didn't, and and even in school, you would have Malays playing with Indians, with Chinese, and it wasn't really a thing. Like, at least in my classroom, you didn't have anyone purposely excluding someone because they were a different race. You would obviously have people gravitating towards each other because they share the same language, for example, or similar cultural quirks or whatever, um, which I think is normal and okay. But I don't think, at least in my classroom, you didn't have anyone, being racist, because it's kind of dumb to be racist in a country like that. And we were young, so I don't know how it is now. I don't know how it is in a workplace because I've never worked professionally at home. But yeah,
I think that's a really interesting point, that we definitely have a different perspective when we're children, because
yeah,
why would we think any differently? We're obviously, the UK is also very multicultural. We have people from all over the world, and I had, um growing up in class, it was very mixed. It was very mixed. And you don't think about that. You don't think, why would you treat anyone any differently? Because
exactly.
at the end of the day, we're all human beings. We're all born in this planet. We're all figuring this thing out together.
Yeah,
And
everyone's growing up. You pee in your
yeah,
bed, so does the other person.
so moving, going to the side a little bit there, about the languages. So what are the prominent languages in Malaysia?
So the official language is Malay. I'd say English is the unofficial second language. Um, and obviously you have a lot of people speaking Chinese or Mandarin or Cantonese, which is it depends on where you go. So okay, I say Chinese. There are a lot of people who disagree with using Chinese as a name for the language. Um, Obviously, there's a lot of people who speak Mandarin, and depending on which cities you go to, at least in Kuala Lumpur, you have a lot of Chinese who speak Cantonese as well. If you
Mhm.
go up to Penang, which is north, really close to Thailand, you'll have more people speaking Hokkien, I think. So like different dialects of different Chinese dialects, but obviously Mandarin. And most of the Indians would speak Tamil as well, because as you know, India has a crazy amount of languages, but the
Is that
Indians are in Malaysia.
Sorry, is that so? The Indian immigration was predominantly from the south. Am I correct in saying that? The south of India?
I I embarrassingly always mix it up. I asked someone about 2 weeks ago who told me uh, where like north to south India. I don't remember, honestly. I don't. So
But the Chinese immigration, is that, so is, I'm presuming mainland China mostly, uh,
yeah, yeah.
but for it we came from all parts of China.
I don't think so. Just because simply going off of on the language, right? Because uh, I assume the Cantonese came from Canton or like Guangdong, the province. Um, I know my ancestors came from that area, not necessarily from Guangdong, the province, but at least Guangdong and slash or the areas around it. But China's big, and I don't think I might be wrong, but I don't believe we came from all over the country back then. But it was a while back, or like zaman dulu, as we'll say in Malay. Um, like my parents were born in Malaysia. My great grandparents were born in China, so I think that's kind
Great
of
grandparents.
yeah.